That was an awesome panel, so I appreciate you guys. I'm going to jump into the next topic. The next topic is exclusive listings. I know that this is a controversial topic of sorts, and I love that it is, because my goal in this is to give you guys some insight on how to approach this, and I'm going to make it far less controversial than you think. At least that's my hope. So, that's the warning. I think that most people have a love-hate relationship with exclusives. And I would actually argue, and this is kind of an interesting way of approaching this, but I'd argue that the fact that you have a love-hate relationship is probably a good thing. If you love exclusives, it's probably a good thing. If you hate exclusives, it's probably a good thing. And I know that that sounds weird, but I really mean what I'm saying, because I think that the I don't care about exclusives, that's the worst scenario. Like the line in the sand, if you're going to put a line in the sand, if you're over here, great. That's not a problem. If you're over here, great. If you're neutral, that's scary to me. And the reason why I say it's scary to me is because, not necessarily because it's a bad thing to be neutral, but because neutrality in many instances kind of breeds like apathy. Like you just don't care, which means you don't speak about it. And I'm just going to tell you, like, the not speaking about it in today's market is the worst thing you could do. And it doesn't matter what position you take on it, but not speaking on it will actually cost you business in certain instances. And I've seen this on a large scale at this point, where I've had agents say to me, I don't understand. I thought I was going to get this listing, and I knew I was competing, but we had rapport and whatever else, but they didn't bring up exclusives. And then the seller decided that somebody else spoke to exclusives, whoever it was, and it was a story. Will was talking about, telling the right story. It was a story that resonated with the seller. They liked that thought process. And because it resonated with them, and it was something that they were like, yeah, that sounds like something that makes sense for me, they went with it because the other person on that day told a better story. So I don't care what story you tell, I really don't. But you need to approach this and make this part of the story. So you can't ignore it, and here's the reason why. We're going to start with the elephant in the room, and then I'm going to back into the logistics of the positives and negatives of exclusives, and then I'm going to give you talk tracks that I would use on a listing presentation, and you'll have all the ammunition you need to either get exclusives or to tell your seller why they should not use them. So the biggest reason why you cannot ignore this issue right now is because it's mainstream. It's not, one person talking about it. You have Compass that's talking about private exclusives and their whole private exclusive network. You have the National Association of Realtors that has taken a position on this with Clear Cooperation. You have Redfin that recently took a position on it. You have Homes.com that took a position, EXP, Zillow, and even the Department of Justice is becoming part of this mix. So when you have all of these forces in real estate that are talking about exclusives, you have to assume that your seller is hearing about it. At least, if it's your best friend and you're the only one being interviewed, all right, maybe you don't have to speak to it. If it's something that you're going on, and it's competitive in terms of a listing, you have to talk about it, have to. So let's talk about the thing that I find most important. I believe that our business should be customer first. It should always be about the client. There's nothing more important than the client in the transaction. So with that in mind, let's go through what I believe is a flawed strategy, and where we're going with this is there's this thing that's going on right now. I'm going to call it Game of Thrones. All of these companies are coming out with positions related to exclusives, and it has nothing to do with the client. And I find that to be very unfortunate. It's all about who could position themselves for power. And that's all that's happening right now. And it's kind of it's so see-through and transparent that it's a joke. But everybody doesn't realize it's a joke. They don't get the punchline of it, because most people only see this clip of the big picture. So I'm going to show you guys the big picture and hopefully build upon it from there. First of all, a question for you. How does a fish get caught? Bait? Nope. No. It opens its damn mouth. A fish wouldn't get caught if it didn't open its mouth. And I'm going to show you how a couple of these companies have opened their mouth and now they're caught. So 2020, we're going to go back in time. NAR's clear cooperation policy. I realize that not every person in here understands what clear cooperation policy is, so let's speak to that for a second. Some of this is boring, but I'm going to read through it briefly. Section 101, within 1 business day of marketing a property to the public, the listing broker must submit the listing to the MLS for cooperation with other MLS participants. Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage website displays, digital communications, marketing email blasts, multi-brokerage, listing sharing networks, and applications available to the general public. They came out with a guideline that states all real estate members. This is 2020, so this is not something, this has been in place. This is not new. Every single person, if you take a listing within 24 hours, you have to put it in the MLS. Now, some of you are like, well, I've been breaking that rule. And I understand, because not every MLS adopted it. And there also was an exception to the rule. The exception to the rule is exclusive listings. And I'm going to make the note. Exclusive listings information for required property types must be filed and distributed to other MLS participants for cooperation. This applies to listings filed under Section 1 and listings exempt from distribution. So now we're going to talk about what's exempt, what they consider exempt. If the seller refuses to permit the listing to be disseminated by the service, the MLS, the participant may then take the listing as an office exclusive, and as such, the listing shall be filed with the service but not disseminated to the participants. Filing of the listing should be accompanied by certification signed by the seller that it does not desire the listing to be disseminated by the service. And then there's a couple of notes. It's not required if the service does not require all types of listings to be submitted to the participants. So this is the carve out, let's call it, and this is a lot of MLSs in the state of New Jersey have decided not to take on clear cooperation or have made their own rules related to it, so some of this doesn't impact us. And then the last part is MLS participants must distribute exempt listings within 1 business day once the listing is publicly marketed. I want to highlight publicly marketed. So if you take an exclusive and you don't do anything, you don't put a yard sign in the front yard, you don't do anything related to that listing, well, then it's exclusively listed, but you're not publicly marketing it. Therefore, you do not have to push it to the MLS, and that's according to clear cooperation policy. All right. So now we're going to fast forward. Well, before we fast forward, let me just explain this. Traditional listings, you sign a listing within 2 business days, you put it into the MLS, you begin public marketing. Office exclusives, you sign a listing within 2 business days, you enter it into the MLS, but you're not allowed to market it publicly. That's if the MLS you're a member of abides by clear cooperation, which, I'm not going to go through every MLS in the state, but depending on where you are, it may or may not be applicable. Any listing publicly marketed, it doesn't matter if it's an exclusive, not an exclusive. If you sign a listing, you begin to market it within 1 day. You have to send it to the MLS. Now, again, you find out for your area, talk to your manager what the MLS by you, stipulates. But let's fast forward, because that was 2020. Those rules have been in place. Now what happens, today, and there's just been this whole movement in a different direction. I'm going to start with Compass here. And I'm going to pick on a lot of people, but I'm going to start with Compass because there's nobody that drove this more than Compass. Not even a question. So Robert Refkin, the CEO of Compass, took a very hard stance on NAR's clear cooperation policy because there were talks about it changing or going away or maybe even becoming more strict. There was a lot of conversation about what was going to happen with clear cooperation. So all of 2024, and you don't even need to follow me or listen to what I'm saying. You could go on Robert Refkin's Instagram page and you will see post after post after post of them taking a position on this. So this is very public. It's an objective fact. They took a position that clear cooperation needs to go away. It is not in the best interest of the consumer, and we should be allowed to have an exclusive listing for as long as we want an exclusive listing, and we should never have to put anything into the MLS. Exclusives, exclusives, exclusives. Okay. Then he comes out in the beginning of the year and he makes predictions that clear cooperation is going to go away, it's going to change, exclusive networks are the direction that the industry is going in, yada, yada, yada. He came out with all sorts of like editorials and different, conversations about why client disclosures, not MLS mandates, push the homeowner's best interest. And he took a very, very strong and harsh position on why the industry as we know it should change. We should not be forced to put any of our listings in the MLS, and it should be every brokerage onto themselves because that's what's in the best interest of the seller. Agree with it, disagree with it, it's up for your interpretation, but that's definitely the position that he's taking. So the next thing is, then they started a marketing campaign. And the marketing campaign, and it's dated, but the marketing campaign for 2025 was Compass's, he was putting out every day, they were putting out like a new, we have 10,000 listings that are exclusive in our network. We have 15,000 listings that are exclusive in our network. And it was this like movement. And then they started doing all sorts of marketing campaigns related to this about a 3-step process of how you should list your home and how Compass gives you an advantage and yada, yada, yada. And so then they started putting out like all sorts of data because they were getting a lot of pushback. And the pushback was, well, hey, we still want to use the MLS, and like, what if people want to be on Zillow, or what if people want to be like distributed to all brokerage in the brokerage community? And so then he kind of stepped it back a little bit, and he put out, on March 4th, 94% of Compass listings sell on the MLS, including Compass private exclusives and coming soons. And then on March 6th, they put out, we co-broke with everyone. So like, yeah, because the negative press was coming out saying, hey, this is self-serving for you guys. Like, you don't care about the seller. What you care about is, trying to double-side the deal. You want pocket listings. That's the goal here. And it's like very transparent. That's, it's very obvious. So his pushback was, no. It's just we don't like the MLS system. We want to privately be able to, market exclusives. So we're going to co-broke with everyone. And anybody who's a real estate agent could go on our website, because our website's the platform, and you could go on our website and get access to all the exclusives that are out there. And so, then you started to see like campaigns and like on buses and trains and all sorts of stuff about, sell your home, keep your privacy. And they're trying to make this whole push. So at the heart of this is, and by the way, they also did this, which to me is like diabolical, is Compass dangles social media campaigns for off MLS listings. They started paying their agents $100 for every piece of inventory that they took exclusively. So I want you to think about this like big picture. This has absolutely nothing to do, when you get to the point where you're paying people to take an exclusive, it has nothing to do with the client. It's not about the client. Like, what is it about? It's really about two things. It's about trying to sell more of your own listings, and it's trying to give yourself an advantage and say, like, we're going to close off this garden, and like, all of our listings are over here. If you want access to our listings, you have to work with us. And like, that's the push that they try to move forward with. So it was like a vice. It was putting pressure on this whole situation that was building up. And this was all before NAR had to make a decision. And then there were a lot of counterpoints that were made from different, people that were out there. I'm not picking on Compass for any other reason other than they were the most vocal on this particular issue, trying to eliminate clear cooperation. And you could see the whole strategy behind it. So then clear cooperation policy gets adjusted. And the NAR committee comes out with new rules that change clear cooperation. And basically, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but it still requires clear cooperation. But now it says that the listing agents, let me just find the line, I apologize. It does not change. They have to list properties on the MLS with one business day of signing a listing agreement, or an MLS's local mandatory submission deadline. So basically what it's saying is the MLSs, they punted. They said, we're not going to make this decision for the MLSs. The MLSs have to define their timeline on what it is. How quickly do you have to put stuff into the MLS? So really wasn't a very strong stance, but it was the let's not get sued stance. And the truth of it is like NAR did not want to say you're mandated to put your listings in the MLS because that could be a whole nother antitrust issue. So what they're saying is like, hey, you have to alert the MLS based on the MLS's guidelines. They're going to define the timeline. Again, it was like this net neutral decision that put all the focus on MLSs. And now every MLS, whether you realize this or not, they're going to have to define their timelines for exclusives between now and September. And so MLSs haven't, most of them I don't think have taken a position on this yet. They're still deciding on how they're going to position this. But the reality is like they have to define for their marketplace what's it's going to be. And you as an agent, what you need to be aware of is between now and September, as MLSs define what this looks like, you need to stay on top of those rules. Because if you don't, you could get fined for not doing what their rules are. And so just be careful about that. I'm just going to make that as a side note. But let's continue down the timeline because it gets really interesting. So then this bomb got dropped on April 10th. Zillow to prohibit listings that are privately marketed. So Zillow, you guys, when I asked you a question before, I set you up. When I asked you a question before, I said, do your clients care about Zillow? I got like a resounding, yeah, they care. Okay. Well, now if you take an exclusive listing and you publicly market it, Zillow will not allow you to put that listing on their site for the life of the listing. That's a big deal, no? Okay. This is literally just taking a shot at Compass. This is saying, oh, you guys want to play your games with your exclusive network? Here's how we're going to respond to that. Go ahead. Choose to push your clients in that direction. But if they do that, you're going to have a problem. They're not coming on our site. And then who followed right behind it? Well, EXP followed behind it too. EXP tried to take a position, which I thought was comical because they just don't have as much inventory. So this is the position they need to take. But EXP took the position of, okay, we agree with Zillow. All of our listings are not going to be exclusive. All of our listings we're going to do, and I love Leo, he's a good dude, but that's their CEO. But the reality is his position was pro-consumer, down with exclusives and all of that. Okay. Then you have Refkin, Compass's CEO, which I thought was really funny. His response to all of this had nothing to do with Zillow because he's got no response. He's a fish that got caught. So his response to all this is to rip on NAR. He puts up a post and says, this is the boardroom of NAR, this is how much money they spent on it, and they're not backing us, and yada, 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 yada. Because he's in this weird spot. Compass is in this really tough place because they put all this effort and money and this whole campaign together, and then Zillow just basically slashed their tires. So, what happened from there is even more interesting is you have CoStar, which owns Homes.com. He came out with this whole editorial letter that came out. I'm not going to read you the whole letter, but I highlighted a portion of it. He said, this week, Zillow's executive announced that homes not listed on the MLS within 24 hours of public marketing won't be published on Zillow for the life of the listing. Simply put, if your listing is not on Zillow within 24 hours, Zillow will retaliate against you and your homeowner by turning off your ability to list on Zillow. It is an incredible move of audacity and a pure power play of epic proportion. Delayed IDX syndication is allowed under NAR guidelines or NAR rules. But Zillow is asserting that they, not NAR, not your brokerage, not you, the listing agent, and not even the homeowner whose house it is and is paying the commission, should decide how a listing is marketed. This isn't about protecting consumers. It's about protecting Zillow's ability to profit from the listing by selling your leads to competing agents. That part I believe is true. Again, I said Game of Thrones. They're all playing a power play. By the way, this whole piece is him trying to take market share away from Zillow. So he's pushing, he's a competitor to Zillow. So he's saying, hey, don't use Zillow, use us. And he finishes with, whether or not you support the clear cooperation policy, it is never acceptable for a real estate portal to threaten agents this way. Real estate portals must remain neutral. Whether you're a buyer's agent, a listing agent, or both, we support all agents and believe you deserve better. And we believe every real estate professional deserves to be treated with fairness and respect, never bullied by a tech platform looking to control an industry. That's a joke. The only reason he's saying all of that is because he's trying to get market share away from Zillow. So this is a whole game. Again, none of this has to do with the consumer, but they're trying to pretend like it does. Then Redfin comes out and says that they're following Zillow. And they're saying that if you now Redfin and Zillow are two of the biggest portals online, period, in the real estate space. So now the two biggest portals, or two of the biggest portals, are saying, hey, listen, guys, if you take an exclusive, you're not going on Zillow. So it's a lot swirling here in terms of who's responding to who and how they're operating and everything else. And it kind of brings us to this conversation of, what about the DOJ? I'll throw that out as well. Now they're saying that people are pushing for the Department of Justice to get involved and try to shut down exclusive networks and say that it's anti-American, antitrust, and yada, yada, yada. So there's a ton going on here. And by the way, this is all the last month, really. So there's more to come, but I want to talk to you about exclusives because if you haven't realized it, it's definitely prominently in the news. Like, it's a big part of what's going on right now. Your sellers are hearing about exclusives. Ryan Snyder, for those of you who were here last month, I had him come and he was asked the question of, what is our position on exclusives? And there was a couple people in the room that were like, we should be condemn exclusives. There should never do exclusives. And there are other people in the room that were like, no, I love exclusives. We use them all the time. And I got to be honest with you, unlike the whole theory of put your foot in your mouth and if you're a fish, you get caught, we're taking a very neutral stance on this. And I believe we should take a neutral stance, although I'm not contradicting what I said before. You as an agent, when you're sitting in front of a seller, should take a stance. We as a company have to give you optionality so your sellers have what makes the most sense for their needs. That's our position. I appreciate that position personally because I think it's an important one to take. So here's the question. Go back to that customer first. One size definitely does not fit all. I believe that wholeheartedly. And for those of you who think that it does, somebody in here before was like, every listing needs to get top dollar and go to market and it needs to do that. Okay, that might be true. But what about this example? I'm a seller, I'm sick, I'm dying in my bedroom, in my living room. And I know that I have these issues going on. I could care less about top dollar. All I care about is convenience. I have to sell my house. I don't want to leave this burden to my son or my daughter. All I want to do is just get my house sold. I want to do it quietly. Mike, you're my listing agent. Can you please just bring a few people in here and get it sold? Should you be putting that one on Zillow? Should you be putting that on the MLS? Of course not. It's a crazy position to take. You're not listening to the instructions of your clients. You're just doing what you feel is a blanket statement for all parties. That doesn't make sense. So another example, seller, we're getting divorced. I need every penny I could possibly get out of this transaction. Should that be an exclusive? No. That should be, go to the broad market, get as many people in that house as you possibly can, and drive the price up as best you can. Make sense? Another example, I'm rich and famous, I require more privacy. That's an exclusive. If you're so rich and famous that everybody wants to see your underwear drawer, the problem is if you put it on, the MLS and do mass marketing, you're going to get a lot of creeps that are going to come into your house that you're trying to avoid. You get that there's nuance to this? It's not a one-size-fits-all system. You have to know both sides of it. You have to be prepared for both sides of it and be able to speak to it. So let's get into the nitty-gritty here. Using the right tool. I'm going to talk about, and again, I'm Switzerland here. I'm going to be very neutral. There's no agenda to this other than to educate you on how to speak to both sides of it. But what I will say is there are talking points for both sides. There are advantages and disadvantages to both sides, and you have to be aware of them. So let's get into that. First of all, let me just explain this for those of you who don't realize this. The language is a little tricky. It's very similar. You have exclusive right to sell and then you have an exclusive, a company exclusive. So exclusive right to sell is putting the house on the MLS. Just to keep it simple for those who might not realize the lingo. If you put the house on the MLS, what are the advantages? It's the most exposure. There's a very simple theory. More buyers, more offers, more money to the seller. Okay? Only way to truly define fair market value. And people could argue this all day long, but how do you know fair market value if you don't get it out to everybody? Like, that's the truth. It promotes a realtor-friendly market. We definitely know that. It promotes competition between buyers, all competing one another because they all get the information. And it's best for analytics. The number of clicks, the showings, the repeat showings, the offers. You have more data when you go to market than you would otherwise. That make sense to you guys? Let's talk about some disadvantages. You only get one chance at a first impression, which means that if that house is not prepared to put it to market and it's not like glowing, you've missed your shot. You got a problem there. Second thing is the house needs to be show ready. Those could be combined. Testing the market can destroy equity. So if you're a seller that's like, I know my house is worth $900,000, but I really want to test out 3.3, like, you have a problem because you're basically shooting yourself in the foot. Like, whereas, it's not the same conversation, when you're dealing with, something that's an exclusive. It's a big problem when you're going to the MLS. Why? Sellers lose leverage. Well, actually, that's not why. That's another reason. But I'm going to tell you, sellers do lose leverage on the MLS. Why do they lose leverage on the MLS? Because if a buyer, let's just say there's multiple offers. If there's 25 offers on a property and a buyer is the top buyer, that buyer knows that there is nobody out there that's willing to pay more than me. They know it. And when they know that, sometimes they act jerky. Like, sometimes they play games with home inspections. Sometimes they try to negotiate the deal in attorney review. Change the terms later. They negotiate everything they possibly can because they know, hey, I'm better than everybody else. And that's why you as an agent got to try to hold them and tighten up the terms and everything else. But the truth is there is a leverage piece of this that goes away once you go to market. And you have to understand that because it's a reality. So tick, 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 days on market. It's a big deal. That was what I was talking about in terms of testing the market. If you test the market as a seller, your days on market are going to tick up. And what's going to happen? Every buyer is going to be like, something wrong with this house? It's been on for 35 days. Like, what's wrong with it? Nobody else is buying it. And they start to question the value and everything else. Timing matters. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But timing matters, the time of the year that you bring it on, the day of the week that you bring it on, all those type of things. And then the last thing is access. Access matters. When you're on the MLS, if you have a seller that can only show it every third Tuesday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, God bless you, you have a problem because people are going to lose their minds. What do you mean I can't get access? I have to get access. You need a seller that gives you access in order for that to make sense. So let's talk about a company exclusive. The differences here, advantages, you can test the market without penalty. Because if you take that $900,000 house for $3.3 million, no days on market are adding up. You're not going to get anybody that shows an interest. I understand that. But there's not really a penalty that goes along with it. It's just that you have an overpriced listing that nobody wants to see. That nobody, it's not like, building up any issue because buyers don't have a tracking mechanism for how long it's been sitting there. So that's something that you gain with it. Another is no days on market, like we just spoke about. So there's not that tracking mechanism in any way. By the way, go back to the first one, test the market. You always have the option of going back to the MLS. So you could test the market at here price. The seller could appease the fact that their house is not worth that. And now when you come to market, you come to it at a good price, at the right price. House does not need to be show ready. You could say to people, listen, I have this listing that I just took. It's a great house, but I'll be honest with you, they haven't done any staging. We haven't painted yet. We're in the process of doing all those things. It's not show ready, but I'm going to get you access early. Just realize that they are going to do all these things before we go to the MLS. So, take it with a grain of salt. That's an easier conversation when it's not on the MLS. If it's on the MLS, they're like, why did they do this? Go ahead.
Why does that not have to go on the MLS?
I'm sorry, ask that question again?
All exclusives have to go on the MLS.
Right now, I'm not talking about what guidelines are going to get put in later, but right now, you could take an exclusive dependent on your MLS. I don't know about your marketplace, so I don't want to speak to your MLS, but depending on where you are MLS-wise, like Garden State MLS, for instance, they did not adopt the clear cooperation policy. So you could take exclusives here, depending on where you are, that might change. Go ahead, Jason.
So on the previous slide, you had said MLS sellers lose exposure, lose leverage.
Correct.
So my question would be, so I understand if I have an exclusive and the buyer is getting cute during the inspection process, you always have that, hey, don't forget, buyer's agent, we never went to the open market, we'll do it.
Yeah.
We'll throw this apart, we'll do it. How is that leverage so grossly different than on the MLS? Hey, buyer's agent, don't forget, 24 other people didn't get this house, they're still cool.
Yeah.
They're both leverage.
You're right. There is leverage on both. It's different leverage, and I'll tell you why. Because when you go to MLS, I gave you an extreme example of 25 offers. What if you don't get 25 offers? And in many cases, you don't. So if you're dealing with like 1 or 2 offers, which is emblematic of today's market, depending on where you are, like the reality is it does have an impact, and there might not be. A lot of this is like a poker game. Like you as the listing agent, you have to you hold your cards and you have to play the cards you have. If you have the alternative of going to the MLS, what happens is in the mind of a buyer, let's just get really philosophical here. In the mind of a buyer, when it's off market, they think that they had access to something that other people did not have access to. And there's truth to that. It's almost like the velvet rope at a club. Like the VIP section's over here, what's going on behind there? It's like once you get access, you have access, but if you don't, you're thinking all right, well, maybe I'm not seeing all the inventory. Other buyers didn't see it. I have an advantage. A lot of it is just psychological, but it does work. Limited access is more acceptable. If you're hey, my people are not really ready to show it, but they'll get you in next Tuesday at 2:00, that works. You got to get there when they're available, otherwise it's not going to work for you. People start to do, they'll jump over backwards as a buyer on an exclusive that they wouldn't otherwise. Seller retains leverage. I just kind of highlighted what that looks like. Hey, listen, your buyers are being nuts during home inspection. We could just take our chances with the market. We tried to give you an opportunity to get a house off market and not have to deal with all the competition of what you're dealing with otherwise. But if you want to play these games, good luck. Go find a house that's on the market and see how that works. And now it's just you have leverage that you would otherwise not have. The timing does not matter. You could bring a listing on any day of the week because it doesn't make a difference. There's no days on market adding up. There's no rhyme or reason to that. You do get 2 shots at a first impression because you get the exclusive launch and then you get to go to market if you choose to do that later. Limited showings as it relates to seller privacy. That goes back to what I spoke about before, but if the seller wants privacy, they could get that with an exclusive. It's really hard to do that on the MLS. All right, so let's talk. Also, exclusivity creates urgency. This is actually one of the biggest ones. When you think about it, if your whole thing in real estate is trying to get buyers to make decisions quicker if you're a seller, you don't want them, I'll think about it. That's the worst thing in the world. With an exclusive, the conversation is, listen, I got you guys access to this exclusively. Other buyers are not getting in here. We don't want to wait for this thing to go to market. We have to have a sense of urgency here because if you buy it off market, naturally it's going to get you, an opportunity to avoid competition and yada, yada, yada. So, there's definitely some, urgency that's created. What about the disadvantages to a company exclusive? It's limited exposure. That's the most obvious of them. It's limited showings. That's obvious as well. Could we get more on the open market? It's always going to be a question. I heard somebody say yes. So I'm going to play devil's advocate on this, and I'll tell you why. I learned as a brand new agent with Bergdorf many years ago that exclusives are the devil. And you never take an exclusive because fair market value is defined as what the market as a whole, once it goes to MLS, drives the price to. And I've watched in Maplewood Like, I've say at least 20 times, probably 25 times, like in the past 10 years, that we've had an example of a company exclusive that we've taken where we've gotten multiple offers in the office and the seller saw their top dollar and said, we appreciate all that, let's go to market. And we want to go to market and we want to test it out, go to the MLS, let's see what the open market will bring. And I've had 25 plus examples where we had a higher number as an exclusive than we did open market. And so anybody who tells me that, like, no, the best way to get top dollar is the MLS, that's true most of the time. That's not true all the time. And it depends on the house, and like there's nuance to this. So like I'm not taking a hard position one way or the other because I do think that there's sides to this. Go ahead.
So I've taken a number of exclusives. My conversation with my clients is this. I will price this exclusive listing at about $50,000 more than what I would put it on the market.
Did you see my presentation?
So, because you know what, I'm giving you guys access to inventory that's not on the market, so I kind of planned that.
I promise we're going to get right into this. So we're going to talk pricing strategy next, and I'll explain the thoughts behind pricing strategy. The listing, I'm not going to get into forms today because I'll answer your question is, I think it depends on where you are. That's why it's kind of hard to answer it with what MLS is. But for us, where we are, like in my areas, we just take one listing form. So we're not doing like specific MLS listings like we used to. All right, so fewer offers, that's naturally, one that makes sense. And then it's less realtor friendly. You're not playing nice in the sandbox with every competitor. All right, so what about that seller that says, and I talked about this before, I want to test my price? Like, I think that's like one of the easiest examples of where exclusives could make sense. And for that reason, I'm going to go into a whole pricing strategy on the way that I told you set me up. What I think, and I feel very strongly about what I'm about to talk about because I know it works. I've seen it, it's tried and true, it works, period. All right, so let's do a case study. An art auction. You have a Banksy painting and you think that it's going to be worth around $100,000. And you are the auctioneer, like you're selling this Banksy painting. So you have that painting that you're going to sell and you walk into the auction house room and scenario number one is the auction room is completely full. You have this whole entire room and it's filled with people. The question is, do you A, price the painting at $100,000? B, price the painting over $100,000, or C, price the painting below $100,000?
Below.
Everybody saying C? Anybody feel otherwise? Oh, good answer. So C, why? That's the big question. Because you have tons of people in the room. The room's full. You're going to get bidding. Like when you get bidding, it drives the price up. So what about scenario number two? You have the auction house room, but only a third of the people in the room. A, B, or C? A? Still say C? I say B. Why? Because you have to account for the lack of competition. There's less competition, there's less bidding of it up. So your pricing strategy changes based on there's less people in the room. You have to account for that. When there's less competition, naturally you have to price it and build a premium in. Why? The biggest reason why is because there's less competition, there's more negotiation. Like the buyers are gonna, instead of fighting with each other, they gotta fight with the seller. Like it's a barter system type of thing, like where you're arguing back and forth. So you gotta think about it like this. The room full is an exclusive right to sell. That's the MLS. The room that's like a third of the way full is a company exclusive. You have to price things accordingly. So exclusive, the room is full. You use price to attract buyers. You let buyers fight each other. That's the strategy, the pricing strategy there. Now, the only exception is the higher the price, the smaller the buyer pool. So if you're in like the ultra luxury, and it's the most expensive house in town, you have to account for that because naturally, even though you're open market, you still have to account for the fact that there's less buyers in that buyer pool. So don't just apply this to every house that you go on and say that, oh, we automatically have to price it well below what it's worth. Because if you do that in the ultra luxury homes, you'll actually get yourself in trouble and your sellers will sell for less. So there, it's just a different strategy, but just putting that out there. Exclusive, rooms halfway or a third of the way full. You test a higher price point, you let buyers reach to avoid competition. It's just a different pricing strategy. Now, if you think about it as a pricing strategy, when you have a seller that says to you, hey, I want to price my house $200,000 over where it belongs. Great. Have you considered an exclusive? Let's test that price out with a third of the market. So we get 2 bites at the apple. And now you're doing an exclusive, you're testing out the price. Once the buyer pool, the Coldwell Banker buyer pool says, we're not interested at that price, now you could say, go back to your seller with concrete information from feedback in the marketplace that, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I know you wanted this price, but unfortunately the market has said no. Before we go to MLS, let's price it appropriately, and then we're going to see where it goes. So it's just a different strategy in terms of how we price. Question for you. Should our sellers sign a waiver of broker cooperation? Everybody know what that is? Basically, if you take an exclusive, you're saying it's exclusively for our company, no other brokers can show it. What is your position on this?
It's exclusive.
Do you think that they should sign it, meaning no other brokers should come in, or they should not? They should not sign it? Is that consensus or no? All right, I hear a lot of mixed responses, which means that we're not taking a firm position on this. Fair? I'm going to argue a point that if you take an exclusive, and there are going to be people that are going to throw tomatoes at my head, I get it. But if you take an exclusive, yes, every single time you should sign a waiver of broker cooperation. And now some people in here, well, why would you not play nice in the sandbox with other brokers? Like I would want every broker to see it. If they have a buyer, why would I push them away? I agree with you. I don't want to push buyers away, just like you don't want to push buyers away. But I'm not talking about pushing buyers away. I'm talking about you're defeating the purpose of your strategy. You have to understand, like you and the point, you're missing it. Like the point of an exclusive is exclusivity. You can't have exclusivity if you invite everybody in the marketplace to see it. Like you go to the MLS if you want to do that. So a couple different things. Exclusives are not required. Go to the market. You want everybody to see it, go to the market. Why should you limit the amount of other companies that are going to see this house if you believe that's the best strategy? Go to the MLS. If you're not going to the MLS and you believe you want to test the market out or whatever else, exclusive buyer urgency requires exclusivity. So like, if you think about it, like if you let a Keller Williams agent into your exclusive, you've just told that buyer, hey, listen, we're telling you it's an exclusive, but it's not really an exclusive. Anybody can get in here, so you don't actually need urgency. And the whole leverage factor that I'm going back with about, hey, we could go to market and take our chances with the market. You just shot yourself in the foot because they're like, wait a second, that's all bullshit because I'm working with Keller Williams and I got access. I know that you're letting anybody in. So what are you gonna? There's no leverage. Like I'm already competing against the market. You're missing the point of an exclusive.
There is because it's not on MLS and they understand if it's not on Zillow, I still have a chance, even though I'm with a different.
I understand, but like my point is like you can't be half pregnant. Like you either have to go to the MLS. Jocelyn's sitting back there like I know. So. You have to either, like, the truth is you either go to the MLS and get all of the perks, all of the advantages that I brought up about, like, going to the MLS, or you don't. You take it as an exclusive and you limit it. Like, it's one or the other. Don't do both. Sellers' options diminish because this is the other thing, because I talked about, like, the leverage part, but think about the seller's aspect. If you push it out to all the local brokerages and they're all aware of the listing, that's your first impression. Like you've put it out to market. Now if it goes to the MLS, 2 weeks later, there's no big launch related to the MLS because they're all like, oh, I've seen it. My buyers have seen it. They passed up on it, whatever. There's not 2 shots at this. You have to be smart about that. And then sellers lose leverage, which I just spoke about. So another question, are company exclusives bad for the seller? We're learning. I like it. All right. No, it's not bad. Why? Because it's a question of sellers do not have to market or show during the exclusive. So here's the thing. If you're somebody who doesn't believe in exclusives, it doesn't mean you don't take exclusives. Maybe you just don't market during the exclusive period. Because if you go back to clear cooperation, you could take an exclusive and then just not market it. Don't put a sign in the ground. Don't do anything. You take an exclusive because now you've locked in that I have this listing, but I'm preparing it. I'm getting all the things done that I need to do. So the other thing is sellers can get offers and still choose to go to the MLS. I said that before. I've had many sellers that have made the decision that, no, we're going to go to MLS. Like, okay, they still have the right to do it. At least they go to the MLS with more knowledge than they had before. That to me is where there's power in this. And then the seller defines the goal. So if the seller, decides that, hey, if I get, $1.2 million for my house, I will skip down the street. I don't care what the market's going to drive it to. I want $1.2 million. The seller is defining that goal, not you. When should you take a company exclusive? I bet you I'm going to trick you on this one. When should you take a company exclusive? When it's right for the seller? No. Every time. Every single time you should take an exclusive. And some of you are like, I don't understand. I thought you said you believe in the MLS and all that stuff. Here's the reasons why, and pay attention. Why? So first of all, you see this house? Do we sell model homes? Some of you might if you're in new construction, but most of you are not selling model homes. You need to get the home ready. What do you do right now from a paperwork perspective? If I walk into a seller's house today and the beds are unmade and there's literally stuff everywhere and there's clutter, what do you do paperwork wise between now and when it goes to the MLS?
Exclusive listing.
An exclusive listing. That's what you do. You have to take an exclusive listing every time, because here's what the alternative option looks like. If you take the listing and you're supposed to go to MLS, okay, so what are you going to list a house that's not ready on the market? That's idiotic. You don't want to do that. The other alternative option is to post-date the listing for, hey, I'm signing it today, but it's for 2 weeks from now. Well, you know what? You're vulnerable for the next 2 weeks. Because if their neighbor sees that they're getting ready and decides to come in with an offer next week, now you're not getting paid. You take an exclusive listing on every single listing you take.
What about coming soon? Isn't that what coming soon? Right.
Coming soon is if you want to choose to market it early. It's an option, but either way, I would still take an exclusive. So another question is, go ahead.
So not every MLS is like that.
Yeah.
So for our MLS, right, our listings go into effect the date the agreement is signed. Our start date, or commencement date as they call it, is the date that it actually goes live to the public. So
Perfect.
You can sign a listing on January 1 and not
So you guys don't always take it. Everybody else always take it. Go ahead.
If this whole clear cooperation thing
Yeah.
gets ironed out, and you have an.
I'm sorry. I apologize for those in the back.
So if this entire clear cooperation thing gets ironed out and Zillow says, if you take an exclusive, we will never put it on Zillow for the life of the listing. Is that just specific to the time it's exclusive or for the life of the listing? So if we take an exclusive and then we put it.
It's for the life of the listing.
So then that's gonna.
I'm going to speak about that, I promise.
Part the seller.
So hold on, stay with me, guys. What the question was is Zillow's coming out with this position, and then it's there's a nervousness that happens. Well, wait a minute, I don't want my houses not to be put on Zillow. You told me to take an exclusive every time. The next comment that was made is, well, how will they know? How will they know is if you market it. So if you take an exclusive and don't market it, don't put it on sites, don't do all of that, Zillow's never going to know that you took the exclusive. They only know if you are public about it, which we're going to talk about in a couple minutes, I promise. So you're not going to, every one of you gets professional video, photography, videography, whatever, on your listings. If you're preparing for that, you're not going to drop everything and do it at the same time you take it's not like I signed the listing, hey, photographer, walk in the door. There's prep work that has to go into this. The other thing is timing. Are your sellers ready to show within 2 days of signing the listing? Probably not. Most people are not ready to go right this second. The other thing is days of the week. Do you list houses every day of the week? I always told my sellers, I want to list your house on a Tuesday. I want to delay showings to a Thursday. I want to start showings on a Thursday with a broker open. I want to do 2 open houses, Saturday and Sunday, and ultimately, if the first buyer that walks in the door on Thursday decides that they want to put in an offer, great. Attorney review is Thursday, Friday, Monday. You get a full week of showings. Like, it's a pretty straightforward, talk track that I would use. Well, if you're taking, if you're taking a listing on a, let's just say on a Sunday, I don't want to list the house on a Sunday because now we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They get put in an awkward position where they're not even getting a weekend full of showings because the first offer came in strong. You just kind of sabotaged your seller's positioning. So to me, like, you take an exclusive and in not the South, you I'm joking with you. For Monmouth County MLS, if you take an exclusive, you don't need to take an exclusive, rather you could do a start date, and I appreciate you giving that aside. But depending on where you are, you got to figure that piece out. When should you take an exclusive right of sale? This is another one that's a little bit of a trick question, so I'm not going to ask you. I personally think that you take an exclusive right to sell every single time. And the reason why I say that is because of a couple things. Even if you sell that house exclusively, because some of you will get an exclusive, you'll sell it, off market, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that if the seller's happy with it. But if you have that situation, why would you take an exclusive right to sell? Like, you're confused by that. Well, the answer is pretty simple. I want comps in the MLS. I want the MLS to see that data. The MLS is a tool for every single person in here. You want the best data in there possible. So if you take an exclusive and you sell it off market, I still want to put that data into the MLS to make sure that I see it later when I need it for comp purposes. The other thing that I'm going to put out there is market share. And I want to speak to this because it leads me into the next thing, talking points. And this is like kind of where I'm going to finish, and I'll take questions. When you think of talking points, like every person in here, I get asked these questions a lot. They're like, you put this presentation together, it's great, but I need specific talking points that I could use with my seller to like go out and either get an exclusive or, advise against them. So this is what this segment is I love exclusives. What would the talking point be that I would use if I'm with Coldwell Banker? Because it's a strong talking point. You could speak to all of what I talked about before in terms of the benefits of exclusives. I'm not going to go into all that because I don't want to revisit what I just spoke about. But the number one thing that I would speak to is pricing strategy. Pricing strategy, why, if you love exclusives, why would you do it? Because it gives you an alternative pricing strategy. So that's number one. And you go to the auction house room is full versus a third full and all that other stuff. It's an easy approach for you to get a seller to understand what the dynamics are of one versus the other. So that to me is a very easy talking point for why you would use an exclusive. But now the question is, okay, great, I'm sold on exclusives. Why would I use you at Coldwell Banker? Why don't I go to some other alternative option that I have, whatever company it is? So I have the best answer you will ever get for this question. Pay attention to this. Right now, the Garden State MLS, we are number one with a bullet. We're number one in New Jersey MLS. We're number one in Hudson County MLS. We're number one in Monmouth County MLS. We're number one in all Jersey MLS. We have all of these brands that we own, some of the biggest real estate brands in the world, including, might I add, Corcoran, which is number one in New York City. Why on earth, if you're testing the market, would you choose to test the market with a smaller brokerage? We clearly have more market share in every single market that you're doing business in across the state of New Jersey. In every one of them. We have more market share. If you're testing the market and you have an auction house room, don't you want to test it with the largest size auction house room you can? There's nobody that has more than us. It's not even close. Just bring up market share. All day long, every day, we just dominate in New Jersey. So if you're going to test the market test the market with the biggest, baddest brokerage around. And by the way, we have an internal system for it called Exclusive Look, which pushes it out to the 5,000 to 6,000 agents that we have in New Jersey.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
All those companies are allowed to see the home if it's exclusive?
Not if you do a waiver of broker cooperation. Yeah, so you could waive that, and that's up to you. I'm going to make a point. Exclusive Look is better than Compass. Private exclusives. Why? They could say whatever they want to push their agenda. They're nowhere close to us because they don't have the market share. They don't have as big of an audience, as big as a crowd that goes into that auction house room. It's not even close when you look at the actual production. And I'll take it a step further. Forget about Compass. We're better than anyone in the field. The field, it doesn't matter what brokerage you point to. There's no one that does more production than we do. Why would you test the market out with anybody else? If you're doing an exclusive, it's Coldwell Banker all day, every day in New Jersey. The next question is, what about those, or talking point I said, those that hate exclusives? Please, you have a question?
Do we have a data on how much we sell on our exclusives?
How much? I mean, so do we have data on how much we sell for our exclusives? You're talking about average sales price, or you're talking about like percentage-wise? I know that, like, I can't speak for every office. I know in my offices, we sell about 20% of our listings off market. So I don't know about every office. I can't speak for that. I bet you in Westfield, it's very high. In Livingston, in Maplewood, it's very high. It just depends on the marketplace you're in.
The slides that you had up there, are they available for us anywhere?
Yeah, I'm going to give you all these slides.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, I try to please. Go ahead.
Michael, if we put it on exclusive look, is that going to trigger the Zillow?
Oh, you bring up a great point that I love you for. So the question is if we put it on Exclusive Look, will it trigger the Zillow issue? And right now, I'm going to speak to that in 1 second, but right now, it won't because it doesn't go public. It just brings it in-house to all of you, so it's not considered a public form of marketing, which is a great thing. Now, whether that changes or not, I don't know. Just to be clear, so pay attention to that. I'm not going to try to take a position because I don't know what we're going to do. We are making enhancements to Exclusive Look, but I don't know what that looks like. I'm sure it will give you functionality to be able to push it out or not. So I hate exclusives. What's the talking point? Well, here's an easy one. If an agent walks into your house and talks to you about an exclusive listing, you should kick them out of your living room. They are not putting your interests first, and here's why. And I'm going to use Compass because this is so perfect. Because Compass is the one that's driving, like, every listing should be exclusive and all that other stuff. All right, so I would say, guys, like, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I understand that you heard this whole strategy, and that's great. That's fine. Like, if you like that strategy, like, I understand why. It's a compelling strategy, right? Here's the problem. The CEO of Compass has come out with data, and they said that 94% of Compass listings that are exclusive do not sell. It goes to market. Only 6% of the time do they actually sell via exclusive. So if only 6% of the time they exclusive, first of all, it's not something that I would put all my money on and bank on. That doesn't make any sense. But I'm going to take it a step further. Zillow and Redfin just said that they're not going to put their listings out there publicly if it goes out to, exclusively first. So if you take an exclusive, you are putting all of your eggs in the 6% of the time basket. The other 94% of the time, you're going to go to market. According to Compass, you don't have to believe me. And the 94% of the time that they fail to sell your listing exclusively, when it goes to market, you're not going to be on the two biggest real estate portals in the game. How's that sound for you? And then when they say, well, how is your exclusive network any different than Compass's, if that question comes up? I'll give you a very easy one. Compass was the fish that opened their mouth. Because how does Zillow know? Compass basically opened up and said, we co-broke with everyone. Come on our site and you can get access to every exclusive listing that we have. What do you think Zillow's doing? Yeah. Zillow is targeting this. That's why they came out with it. Zillow is basically going on Compass's site and saying every single listing that you came out with, that you promised the world that you're going to give access to, is on our dead to me list. You're no longer allowed on our site. Unless you no longer list, because remember, it's for the life of the listing. So if that seller chooses to leave that listing agent and that listing brokerage and go somewhere else, Well, now they can be back on Zillow. It's the perfect answer. Like, if you're competing with Compass or anybody else in the marketplace on exclusives, if the seller is dead set on exclusives, great. There's nobody that's a better answer in New Jersey than Coldwell Banker. Look at the market share. Don't you want more people in the room? Of course you do. That's the whole point of the exclusive strategy. And if you absolutely are like hateful on exclusives and you don't want them, great. Give them ammunition. Tell them that if somebody talks about exclusive listings in your kitchen, kick them out. They're not looking out for your best interests. I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth intentionally because you guys are all independent contractors. You choose what makes the most sense for you. All right, any questions? I see people going, ah!
That's a great not to say it.
Do we know?
Go ahead, hold on.
Do we know how Zillow is gonna track it? Could you term a listing and then put it back on, or they see the same?
No, they're tracking it. Zillow, so right now, if you think about it like this, how many of you guys take a listing overpriced, put it on the MLS, get your seller to adjust their price, drop it down, not drop it down, pull the listing from the MLS, put it back on at a lower price? How does that impact the days on market with Zillow? It doesn't. It impacts the days on market for the MLS. It has no impact on Zillow because Zillow views the term of the listing as long as that company has it. So to me, like, I wouldn't play games with that. Like, don't put yourselves in a position where it's going to screw you up and screw your seller up. Go ahead.
How did Zillow get access to Compass and not to Coldwell?
Because Compass was stupid enough to put out to, the question is how does Zillow have access to Compass? Because Compass took a very public and loud position about every listing that we take will be publicly marketed on our website if you want it, if you in the real estate community want it. Zillow is a real estate broker. They have access to everything and they're going to spider their sites. They've already made announcements that that's what's going to happen. Ours are not public. They're internal. So there's nothing that they could get access to internally because they don't have access unless they're an agent with Coldwell Banker.
And even if they got in there, they did it illegally, so they can't.
Correct. They can't block it. What other questions do we have? I have a question for you. You got one? My question for you before I go over to Marcia is, you guys feel a little bit more better educated about exclusives? More comfortable? Did you change your position on exclusives one way or the other? Yeah? All right. I got you thinking.
How are we dealing with the MLS fees now?
Oh, the MLS fees. All right. It's funny. Where's Dawn? Dawn Morrow, she's waving back there. Dawn came to me earlier and she said, Mike, we got to do something, a session or something along the lines of MLS fees. Yep. Like how are we dealing with MLS fees and all that stuff? I'll put something together. The short answer is, and I'll just kind of get to the chase on this, is every person has 24 hours in which, every listing agent has 24 hours in which to present your offer. If you don't put an MLS fee into your offer, they can't restrict it from going to the seller. Now, could they play games and try to get another buyer of the house and all this other stuff? Of course, they could do that anytime. But the point is like if you're presenting an offer and the listing agent says, no, I saw you present this offer, but it doesn't say minus 250 in the offer. I would say, I understand that, my buyer's not interested in paying it. And if they say, well, what do you mean your buyer's not interested in paying it? It's you that's paying it. I would say, that's not true. My buyer and I have an agreement for 3%, not 3% minus 250. I'm not going to pay your fee. You could pay your fee or your seller could pay your fee if you wish to. I've discussed this with my client. My client doesn't want to pay the $250. That's why we submitted the offer the way we wrote it up. And if they say to you, well, wait a second, like, I'm not going to submit your offer until you do this. That's illegal. You have 24 hours in which to submit my offer. I'm not trying to give you a hard time, but let me give you the big picture on this. Coldwell Banker is the #1 listing broker in the state of New Jersey with a bullet. It's not even close. We destroy everybody on the listing side. And here's the problem. We as a company have made a decision. We know that in light of August 1st of last year, we understand that the game has changed. We as a listing brokerage no longer get to dictate what a buyer is, God bless you, what a buyer is willing to agree to with their seller, or with their buyer client rather, their buyer agent. So a buyer and a buyer agent, a buyer broker define what they get paid. That's the way it works now. What we did as a company is we said, okay, because we can no longer define that, we're going to remove all MLS fees from all of our listings moving forward. We don't charge MLS fees any longer. Now I want you to think about this. Think of like we're dealing in a world of trade imbalance right now with tariffs and everything else. Think about the trade imbalance that's going on in that equation. We're the number one listing broker and we no longer charge MLS fees. Do you think that that's financially good for us? Of course not. It hurts us. It hurts us to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. So if we're willing to take a position, which is the right position, by the way, to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in lost income, lost revenue that we would have had previously, because it's the right way to do business, I'm sorry, Mr. Listing Agent or Mrs. Listing Agent, but I'm not willing to pay a fee that you're charging me. I can't pay your fee and not accept mine. It doesn't work. Like, we're not hypocritical. We're playing this exactly how it should be played.
I think our brokers need to know this, because this is brand new information for us.
If your broker doesn't know this, they're probably going to want to throw a tomato at your head, because every broker knows this. We've had this conversation over and over and over again, so if you're not hearing it, go back and have a conversation. What?
You said that to an agent in Bergen County, you would lose the deal.
No way. No way. I don't agree with you. She said, I'm respectfully, I don't agree with you. Listen, I'm going to say it to you this way. She said the answer, I promise I'll jump around. The answer or the statement that was made is, if you say that to an agent in Bergen County, you're going to lose the deal. I handle more offers, and I'm in Essex County in fairness, but I'm telling you right now, Essex County is not like lagging behind in terms of competition. Like, it's super competitive marketplace. And in Essex County, I handle more multiple offers than anybody in Essex County, hands down, because we're the biggest operation and all multiple offers come to me. So I look at these offers, very, very rarely are offers separated by 0.5% or 1%. Usually there's separation between offers. Almost all the time there's a good amount of separation. It's never a $25 to $500 separation. Ultimately, the seller is going to decide what they want. Like, we have a notion in our head that it's going to cost us the deal. It's not going to cost us the deal. It's the seller's going to make that decision, and you just got to come in with strong offers. Go ahead.
Michael, do you know if that's all Anywhere brands or just Coldwell Banker?
Can you ask me, what do you mean by that?
All on the Anywhere brands.
Just go right banker, the franchises have.
The franchises have the ability to do whatever they want. Like, they make unilateral business decisions on that front. So I think it's just Coldwell Banker, but it doesn't mean that they didn't follow suit. I just don't know the answer for every franchisee.
This might be a dumb question.
No such thing.
How do you handle the listing commission from the listing agents? You just leave open for the buyers? Because
so the question is like, when I take a listing, do I leave the buyer side compensation open? I would encourage you to go back to, I'll answer the question, but for those of you who want more detail on this, I thought Frank Isolde did an awesome job on this a few months ago. Frank Isolde, if you go on my YouTube channel, you'll see all of the different videos from the past, every single session that we've had here. But Frank Isolde's session dug right into that topic, so did Jill Biggs. I personally think that the answer is to not offer out a buyer side commission in terms of stating the number. Yes, you should be willing to consider offers of compensation if you're the seller, but I wouldn't define the number personally, but that's, to each his own on that. Do you have another question? No?
I do.
Yeah, please.
Actually, it's not a question, it's
a statement, huh?
No, I'm seeking advice.
Advice, okay.
So I
You can do that too.
strongly believe in exclusives. I've had quite a few successful close and all that. I had a conversation recently with a client who is probably the most expensive house in Randolph at the moment, if I were to list it. Probably around 1.4, 1.5. My first.
Everybody in Randolph is like headed to that house right now.
Anyway, I swear, it will be, it is. Anyway, they're not ready to go to market.
Okay.
Because they're building a house in North Carolina.
Yep.
So he's ready to close January. Of course, I talked to him about exclusive, my first thing, my first point. I even talked about our luxury and the benefits of the luxury. I had my luxury presentation and all that. I still was not able to convince him. Any advice on how to convince him?
Yeah. Where's OT? OT, wave your hand back there. Stand up. Come here. OT's like, leave me alone. I'm sorry, I'm interrupting your lunch. But can we have this is like the perfect way to answer this question. Can I put you on the spot real quick? All right. Sure. He's like, do I have a choice? So, Wyoming, remember that listing? Mm-hmm. So, what happened with that listing? Explain, because you and I went on a listing appointment together.
Right.
What happened with that listing? Because it's a similar situation where they weren't ready to go to market yet, and we took a different approach, and we were in competition. Talk to us about that.
Well, we took an exclusive listing, and while we were preparing it, we actually were in competition with a competitor, huge competitor in that market, and because we actually took an exclusive listing, that's the only reason why we got it, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Otherwise, they say that they had not heard of that option, and because we gave them a different option, that's why they went with us.
So I'm going to add a couple of things to this because I appreciate you saying this. The answer to your question, in my opinion, was it was a very similar situation. It was a great house. They wanted top dollar, but the issue for them was timing. It was a big deal related to timing because they wanted to explore the market today, but they knew they didn't want to sell it a month from now. They wanted to sell it months from now. And what I said to them and what OT said to them was, ultimately, listen, like you want control over this situation. In order to maintain control, because that's ultimately what you're looking for, is you want your cake and eat it too. You want the date you want, but you also want to lock into the price that you want today and not have to worry about the uncertainty of this future set market. So what we did was we said the problem that you have as a seller is if you get a buyer today in today's world, and then you say, hey, we're going to hold off on closing it till all the way then. The problem that you have is that they can't get a mortgage commitment for months from now. They could lose their job, they could have, credit issues, whatever. Kind of weasel their way out of a deal. So the two approaches that I would suggest is either A, you lock into a deal and then don't do the mortgage commitment for future state, which to me is way more risky, or the alternative is you close with a lease back. And that's the options that we were talking to these clients about is you could lock in today with a future date for when we move out because your house is under construction, and it could be open-ended where, hey, we'd like to close in August, but it may get extended to September. So it gives them options that they wouldn't otherwise have.
UNO is too long, that's only 60 days to do it.
Well, you could do a use and occupancy longer. And the mortgage people are like, close your ears, but it does work. We've done it plenty of times. Thank you. Any other questions? You got one. Is that you raising your hand?
No.
You're just waving at me?
I'm just coming over.
You just want to making me walk. Anybody else? We good? I got one up there. All right.
Pocket listings.
Is that a question or a statement?
I have a client, a high net worth client, he has a house, full view of the ocean, three houses in Buffalo Branch. There are no comps. If I were to price it, it would probably be around $6 million. He said, if you can get me somebody, he said privately, if you can get somebody privately, like through your network, that'll pay $7 million, I'll probably sell it.
Yeah.
So nothing in writing or anything like that. And so my question is, hey, anybody here have a client who has to pay $7 million?
So Can I?
But also, how do I handle that?
So it's very simple. You absolutely take an exclusive listing, and what I would say to him is, I would say, listen, here's the thing. I'm willing to shop this around and try to, work my network to get it. But if I wind up finding that buyer, I have to protect myself that I'm going to get paid. So ultimately, like, if we never have to go to market, you don't have to worry about that. It's not like I'm going to publicize this in the newspaper. Like, I have certain rights. The rights are, I get to work my network, but we have an agreement in place that if for whatever reason I bring you a buyer, this is what I'm going to get paid. You have to do it as an exclusive, like without question. Because if you start to talk about this and shop it prior to having an exclusive in place, if you find that buyer, great, they could connect with one another and now you're cut out of a deal, a $7 million deal, no less. So I don't take what's being asked, and I don't know if you're asking this or not, but I want to clarify this, to me it's a question of an open listing or an exclusive listing. I never do open listings. Open listings means I don't have any paperwork, but if you bring me somebody, I'll sell it. Yeah, right. If I bring you somebody, I have something in place. So if an exclusive doesn't work for you, the only other alternative option would be a one-time showing agreement. And a one-time showing agreement, you could write up as like a standing showing agreement, which is not technically an exclusive listing agreement. It's just that if I bring you a buyer, you're going to pay me X. The only problem that I have with an exclusive, with a one-time showing agreement, is it has to be specific to the listing side, not the buyer side, because of all the changes that have taken place in real estate. Like, you can't get paid on the buyer side unless the buyer agrees to it. You don't want to shop listings to a potential buyer without having something in place paperwork-wise. So that's the way I would approach that. If anybody has any other questions, I'm happy to stay and answer them. But I promised you guys all a gift.